All right, we're on a roll. We're on to part 2 of the Critique for Your Depth of Field project. And let's see what we have going for us now. Oh, here's a nice portrait of this young lady against the wall. I'm assuming this is the deep depth of field, since it shows both her and the posters behind, which I'm told are her designs. Nicely done. Again, the technical part of this has been extremely well done. You've lit her pretty nicely. The posters all stand out so we can see the quality of her work. This would make a nice portfolio shot. So I don't really have much to say about this. I think you've done a really nice job. I might crop this off a little, simply because, or it would be nice to swap out posters where there was a little more information and not all this blank stuff, but that's nitpicking of the first order. So I think you did a really nice job with this. So let's move on to the next one. And here we have another portrait, and here we have exactly the opposite approach. Here with a nice shallow depth of field, a location portrait, outdoor lighting, a little flat. The only thing I would caution you all against is one of the traditional wisdoms for outdoor portraits forever has been that the lighting in open shade is really nice. It's semi-directional, although in this case there isn't much direction to it. But it has always had one problem in color. It was wonderful in black and white. But the light in open shade is much cooler than the light in the sunlight surrounding it. And you can begin to see that in this shot. In the film days, one of the most popular filters was called a skylight filter. And it was basically a very pale, warming filter that was used to warm up skin tone. And because it did such a nice job, a lot of people just left it on their camera like a UV filter to help protect the lens. But it really made skin tone look a whole lot nicer. Let's take a quick look at what it might look like if we did that to ours. I've made a duplicate layer just so we can do a little blending if we need to. So let's go into Image, Adjustments, Photo Filter. And here we have a couple of the different warming filters. They're very, very similar. And if we dial it back to where it's just barely applied, you can already see the effect it's had of making the skin look nice. Let me turn the preview on and off. There's the original. There's the one with the filter applied. So it really does make a huge difference in how skin looks. So be aware of that when you're shooting there. Either do a custom balance, which is always possible, and will solve everything. Set your camera for shade, which will accomplish the same thing as the skylight filter, or fix it in Edit. Don't let things go by. When it's time to edit them, fix them. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Nice housing development scene. Clearly we're talking about maximum depth of field. It shows the houses off, shows the little park in the housing area. So it's a nice shot. It certainly shows the issue of maximum depth of field. You know what would be nice in this, though, to make these houses stand out, would be if the sky were darker. So let me show you a simple way to do that. This is what some people have called a digital polarizing filter. So we're going to come over here to Layers, make a duplicate layer. We'll set this layer mode to luminosity. And of course, nothing has happened, because what luminosity does is impose the tones of the top layer onto the bottom layer. You're still seeing the bottom layer, but as it is modified by the top layer. So if we come back up here to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. Now, if you look over here in these icons, we have turned this top layer into a black and white layer. but you're still seeing the color. Why is that? Because, remember, you're seeing the bottom layer as the tones on the top layer are impacting it. Now, suppose with our black and white function, we simply darken the cyans. Maybe a little bit of the blue. We've now just started to apply a polarizing filter to the sky. Now, in these low-res shots, it can be awful because the compression artifacts start to show up in the sky. Let me overdo this so you can see them. See the way it's banding in there? Oh, now you can really see it in the cyan channel. Lots of banding. That is JPEG compression at its worst, which you normally don't see because they blend together well. But if this were your original high-res file, you can make some amazing changes. You can take individual colors or primary and secondary colors and lighten and darken them with this function. So it provides an interesting way to solve some issues. Okay, let's move on. A nice shallow depth of field shot of this plant shows it in location, in situ, as they would say in Rome. So this is a really good beginning. What I would do is, this part is really nice. Your shot is right here with this flower and maybe a little bit of the surroundings. So what I would do to get rid of this bright sky, I would either put some tone in it or darken it so that it doesn't take your eye away. Remember, light areas, especially in a medium to dark scene, are going to draw your eye like a magnet. So one simple solution, of course, would be simply to try to crop it out a little and reduce it in size. This still gives us a sense of place, but removes all of that. We can darken it. We could burn this in or clone it in from this roof line and darken it down. And what we've also done is started to really make this plant stand out. This is a very nice shot. Good call on this. So let's go on. Well, this is an interesting shot. I have to tell you, I could not for the life of me figure out what this was when I first saw it. I mean, clearly it's a waterfall of some kind, but the lighting is hardly natural, and then I saw the fence and all of this. But this is an interesting shot with the bizarre turnabout of a blue foreground and a dark orangish brown sky. It definitely shows the maximum depth of field. So was a certain success in that. We do still have some tone in these highlights. That's good. So overall, it was a pretty successful shot. The catch is, what's it really about? Is it about the waterfall? In which case we don't need all of this. Is it about what's going on in this grotto? In which case it would be nice to see it better. So really, you've got to start thinking about, what is the purpose of my shot? What am I attempting to show? The lights behind, I assume these lights are behind the waterfall to kind of glow through and all. Those could be really cool. But I would emphasize it more, and if that were the shot, really, then I would be into something like that, where that's what you're really seeing, and maybe move around a little bit to center it a little better. Okay, let's go on. Well, we have here an interesting artifact shot. I confess I would have no idea what this is, other than the fact that it is shell encrusted. It's clearly been in the water a long time. I'm drawing the assumption, especially from the name, that this is the minimal depth of field. It definitely serves as that, and it helps you concentrate on this. If the goal is really to look at this pattern in detail, a slight change in angle to bring this out might do that. And again, I would, if that is our plan, then I would come right in on this thing. Let's see it. If this is the goal of it, to show off this really cool dredged out of the sea artifact. As you can see, it isn't a big crop, but all of this space in here, all of the space that is now darkened, are pixels that are thrown away. Whatever your camera's resolution was, we just threw away easily a quarter of them, maybe a third of them, as if you didn't have them. So it's as if you had a 18 megapixel camera and what you really used was 12. So think about that when you're shooting. If you've spent money, particularly on a higher res camera, then you want to see it all. And if you have a low res camera and you're trying to get the maximum quality, you can't afford to lose any of it. So move in on your subject. But this is nice. This definitely meets the criteria of the assignment. This is similar to one we had in part 1. Nice pattern shot. And again, the issue with all of this is, where is this shot? As a minimal depth of field shot, it definitely works. It solves that. This part of your scene is nice and sharp. Everything behind it is starting to go soft. Okay, cool. We have shallow depth of field. Now, do we have a photograph? And what I would do with this is exactly what we did with the last one. Is I'm going to apply a Gaussian filter to it, just so I can eliminate the obvious. And now I want to know what shapes, patterns, designs in this image are going to draw my eye. Probably in this area. Probably over here on the right side of the screen, just below this highlight. Maybe, although I'm not sure, but maybe to include that highlight is where we're going with this. So let's cancel out of that, see what we have. Oh, that highlight's unfortunate back there. But still, let's see if we bring this in. And work on this. And now we darken this in the back. We'll do it our standard way. We'll make a duplicate layer. Make that a multiply layer. Use a normal layer mask. So we want to use a black brush. And let's set this down to about 40%, somewhere in there. And now we can make that stand out even more from the background. And it's still a shallow depth of field shot. It's a peering through the fence thing, a prisoner dying to escape the constraints of modern urban living, holding him back from the riches of the city. Right. So I'm not sure which this says it's maximum depth of field, but if that were the case, then we really ought to have the fence in focus to get maximum depth of field. So it doesn't quite match for that, but it's an interesting concept piece. The thing is, it's static. Well, in some ways, maybe it's supposed to be. You're behind the chain link curtain, held back from the riches of things. Okay, fine. It would be nicer if it were just a touch more off-centered, and I don't really know which side would be best to drop. Maybe this. It's the city that is attractive, not the sky. Sky's pretty boring. And the airplane maybe to not only take you out of the city, but off into adventures yet unknown. This probably sells that a little bit stronger by getting rid of more extraneous stuff. But it's an interesting concept for a piece. Moving on. Oh, well, that's definitely an interesting shot. But now this one is supposed to be maximum, but the background's soft. So On a true maximum depth of field shot, we ought to have the background showing up. Okay, that aside, how about the shot itself? Well, again, we've got this bullseye placed object that's fairly static, and I guess you could argue that as a gravestone or the occupant that it labels is going nowhere, or if they are, they've already gone. So this is nice and accurate. Okay, maybe. I think, though, again, because the writing is on this side and there's more interesting stuff around it, particularly if this were all in focus, I would consider this to be my direction for the picture. And then I would like to bring that sky down a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is crop into where I think the real picture is a little better. How much of this ground do we need to stay on a grassy knoll? And now with that same luminosity layer trick, there's our luminosity layer. We'll go up here to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. Let's bring that yellow back up a little. Now, we're going to have to get tricky with this. Obviously, this dealt with things globally. No problem. We turn that into a layer mask. And with our black brush, and I'm not going to worry about being terribly precise here in the interest of time, but we can bring this detail back out. And still bring that sky down. And darkening it showed we have some little sensor spots on there. So I'm going to flatten this. Use my spot healing brush. And a nice little tiny brush. To get rid of those spots. And now we're cleaned up and we've got a shot with at least a nice sky behind it. Okay, on to, it looks like it's the last one coming up. Well, this would be a wild guess, but I would bet this was taken at the same time as the other one. Some of these markers and statuary in the cemeteries are really kind of give you pause. I mean, what are they supposed to represent, and why this one looks like it's the top of something that's been broken off? Or would they have put it in the ground like it's coming up out of the ground? That'd be pretty spooky. So sometimes cemeteries can be real troves for shooting, for places to photograph. So let me drop this brightness in here a little bit. See if we can put just a little more tone in her. I'm going to do it with curves. I'm betting where that is. Let me hold down the Alt key, click on that, see where the little circle is on that line. That means right here are those tones. And they're the highest tones in there. All of this is essentially gone. This could have stood a different exposure. But let's bring that down, and we'll bring that part back up and put a little life into the grass. And now that we've got that, now I think we can crop in on this. What a sad, sad face on this piece of sculpture. Wow. Well, okay, that's part 2 We'll be getting this up and assembled, and then we'll move on to part 3. So see you next time.